My name's Leonard Kozianski. I'm an artist. This is my studio. Welcome to my studio. I'd like to talk to you today about prehistoric pornography, or sexually explicit imagery, or erotic imagery from the Stone Age, from the Paleolithic era. We're talking 40,000 years ago. What did the cavemen like to look at? What did they consider to be sexy and erotic and exciting? Well, let's find out. Well, here's an example. The Venus of Willendorf. This is from about 25,000 years ago. It's about 4.5 inches high. It's carved out of limestone, probably carved with a piece of sharp flint. And when we look at it, it's like, whoa, that's not very erotic or very appealing at all. But it was to the caveman. And it's hard for us to imagine, but this is actually a major technological and technical achievement, because they had no tools, they had no photographs. And so anything that they made by hand with very primitive tools, like pieces of sharpened flint. And so when we look at the detail in that cap, that braided cap, that's pretty amazing for 25 or 30,000 years ago. But when we look at the features, the large breasts, the large belly, the vagina, it doesn't look very sexy to us, but this is a caveman's fantasy. And so here we see that same statuette, that same figure from a number of different angles, large rear end, large breasts, tiny arms, no feet. And so it's probably the caveman's fantasy. And we have to remember, back then, there's no indoor plumbing. So people didn't bathe regularly, and there's no grocery stores, so they didn't eat very well. So the women were probably very thin. And so a round, plump woman was a real turn on for a man back then. And they didn't bathe very well often. So they're probably kind of dirty and kind of smelly. So sexual behavior had to be encouraged. Fertility had to be encouraged, because having babies meant that your family expanded, that your tribe expanded, and that you could thrive. And without them, you couldn't. So sexual behavior had to be encouraged. And perhaps these statuettes, or this statuette, was part of some religious ritual meant to encourage fertility. Maybe it was part of some sort of rite to some sort of fertility goddess. Here's another example. This probably the earliest ceramic piece that we have that has survived from 25,000 years ago. And look at the exaggerated sexual features on that. I mean, those breasts, those pendulous breasts, they look like torpedoes. And the hips are huge. And the belly is huge. Is this woman pregnant? Because this is a fertility statuette. So, you want to incorporate that idea of sex and fertility, childbirth. This is all part of the same activity, which is considered to be very healthy, very important for the Paleolithic society. This one is carved out of mammoth ivory. Again, it's about 4 or 5 inches high. But at the time, 25,000 years ago, there were still mastodons. There were still woolly mammoths running around. And so this was carved from one of their tusks. Again, exaggerated sexual features, exaggerated female sexual features, breasts, belly, a vagina. Here, this is from 15,000 years ago. This is carved ivory. This is from Russia, found in Russia. And the woman is probably a younger woman because she has a narrow waist, but large breasts, large thighs, large hips. Again, meant to entice or encourage sexual behavior. It's an erotic image, an arousing image. meant to get men turned on, because sexuality was very important for their societies to thrive. And here, this statuette, again, a 4 or 5 inch statuette from the Indus River Valley in India. Exaggerated sexual features, large breasts, large hips, and a very elaborate hairdo. And this one has a much more finished head. So she's more human. As we get later and later with these statuettes, they start to become more like real human beings. And this, 2400 BC, in Greece, from the Cyclades Islands. This is carved marble. And it's about, 11 and 12 inches high. A female figure. But notice she has feet and hands and a large head. She has breasts, but they're not exaggerated. This is more like the representation of a real woman, rather than just sort of an erotic fantasy that was had by some caveman 20,000 years ago. And this, a very realistic figure from Egypt, from 610 BC. This is a royal consort. This woman is part of the royal entourage. And this statue, the purpose of this statue was to turn the king on, to get the man turned on. It's an erotic statue. It had an erotic purpose. Keep in mind that, fertility, sex, had a very religious component to it. And, this was a healthy thing, both physically and emotionally. You wanted more children, more babies. And the only way you could do that was with sexual activity. If you wanted an erotic image, an enticing image, you had to create it out of some sort of physical material. And this is cast in silver. This is a copy of the Venus of Cnidus, or the Aphrodite of Cnidus. In Greek culture, Aphrodite was the goddess of love and sex. And this statue is a Roman copy of the Greek original. Now, the Greek original was done by Praxiteles in 400 BC. And it's lost. It's gone. But we do have these copies of that statue. And this one, the Colonna Venus, is in the Vatican, and it's a 2nd century AD Roman copy of this famous Greek statue of Aphrodite. And this statue of Aphrodite was kept in the temple to her. A temple was a religious site for prayer and worship of the goddess. And men were encouraged to go to this temple to pray, but also to get erections, to get hard-ons, while looking at this very sexy statue of Venus, of Aphrodite, who here is carved very realistically, very humanly, in a way that's meant to get men turned on. Notice the very sort of modest pose that she has, and she's, grabbing a towel as she's stepping out of the water. This is a very erotically charged image for Greek men in 400 BC. And here, from 200 BC, this Greek statue, this is actually a Greek statue, the Medici Venus, a very erotically charged image taken to the Uffizi Gallery, where it is today. But when it was on display, young men walking through the gallery had to look at the floor as they were passing by, because it was felt to be so sexually stimulating that it would encourage lewd behavior. And they didn't want that. So the men had to look down at the ground when they were walking by. But even today, it is still seen as a very erotically exciting image. And in the 18th century, in 1772, here is this painting of the inside of the Uffizi Gallery. And notice we have the Medici Venus over there on the right, up on a pedestal. And we have the painting of the Venus of Urbino by Titian over there on the left. And notice the men are all standing around these images of these naked women, appreciating the fine art, the excellent craftsmanship. Notice those men staring at that naked woman's rear end with wide eyes. And also notice that two of the gentlemen in the gallery are wearing, the ones over on the right, are wearing ceremonial swords. That meant that they were members of the aristocracy. These men in this gallery, they are the cream of the crop. They are the elite of European society. And here they are, clustered around these images of naked women, appreciating the fine art. Well, notice that they're not looking at the paintings of the life of Jesus or of the history paintings or of the Renaissance portraits. They're looking at the naked women. And, even that man over there on the right, the one with the black coat, notice he doesn't just have a ceremonial sword. He's also wearing a sash, and he has some sort of medal on his breast. So, he must be like a major aristocrat, like a duke or a count. And so here, this love of sexual imagery is common throughout history, through the elite, through all of society, from the elite all the way down, for 40,000 years. And even today, in the 20th century, here from 1917, this Hollywood movie, Cleopatra, and here's Theda Bara, the actress, playing Cleopatra, dressed to kill. I mean, she looks as hot as you can make her and still have her be decent. And of course, this draws the men like flies to the theater, and it sells Hollywood movies because Hollywood knows that sex sells. But unfortunately, in the Victorian era, sexually explicit imagery or sexually explicit behavior was repressed. It was discouraged. It was considered unseemly, sinful, and bad. Whereas, like I said, in the Roman era, it was considered very healthy. But here we have in Hollywood this very erotically charged image of Cleopatra. And even today, even with one of the most famous magazines from the 20th century, we have, these erotically charged, very erotically arousing images in this magazine. And the metaphor that they use for these women is the rabbit. These are bunnies. And we've all heard that expression, well, they do it like rabbits. Well, that was the metaphor, turning these women into these bunnies. And the women were very enticing, very seductive, beautiful women that were just begging for a man. And you could see it in their faces, very inviting looks. And, and here we are in our own time with these podcasters and these TV personalities telling us that pornography is evil and it's bad and you shouldn't look at it. And, who are these people that are telling us that? Well, these are these guys that are, making millions of dollars every year. Okay. And so, of course, their wives love them. They talk about their families. Oh, my wife loves me and I have children and, oh, the dogs and what a great life we have. Well, yeah, you're making millions of dollars. Of course, your wife is going to love you. Women love money. Women love riches. And there you are making $50,000 a year and your girlfriend just dumped you and you feel awful and you feel guilty on top of it because you're attracted to these erotic images on the internet, and you feel like, oh, I'm being bad, I'm being evil. Well, that energy does have to be channeled in a productive way. We do have to respect women, but they have to respect us, and they have to respect our sexuality. And if we find ourselves being shamed or belittled because of our sexuality, then, what we have to do is, and I'm talking to you guys out there, if you find yourself being denigrated because of your desire for someone, then what you have to do in that moment is say, bye-bye, bye-bye, and turn around and walk away and never look back. I mean, Jesus was next to this total slut, and what does he tell her? He says, I can't condemn you. And there I was, and here's this woman telling me, oh, you just want a slut. That's all you want. Why? Well, as if my desire for a beautiful woman, an attractive woman, a seductive woman is somehow bad, is somehow wrong, is somehow evil. No, it's a very normal and natural part of the human psyche and has been part of the normal and natural human psyche for thousands and thousands of years. And we have the proof going back to 30 and 40,000 years ago, back to cavemen and cave women. Respect yourself. Respect your desires. Respect your love of erotic imagery, naked women, sexually explicit imagery, but just don't let it ruin your life. Don't let it prevent you from doing things that you need to do. But, in our own society, we are shamed and we are belittled for our sexual desire. Okay? And we are punished for it. And any behavior that we are punished for, we do less of. And then we pick up the newspaper or we watch TV and we see these statistics about how we're not reproducing ourselves. We're not having enough children. We're not having enough sex. Well, I wonder why. If you punish people for a certain behavior, they're going to stop doing it. And so respect yourself, respect your desires, but channel them in a creative way, in a respectful way that's not only respectful to your partner, but that's respectful to you too. Thank you for watching this video.